Die Before You Die is a Sufi teaching that really has more to do with life than it does with death. I mean, sidebar, right? We don't need to teach dead people how to be dead. They're pretty good at it, like, already. So Die Before You Die is more about how to live than it is about actually physically dying. This is a teaching that is also a Buddhist teaching. And if you do some research, you'll find that there's really a lot of Christian commentary on this as well. So we're going to do a whole series where we examine all the different aspects of Die Before You Die. What does it mean? How do we be in that state where we have died before we physically die, which is talking about a state of freedom, is what it's talking about. So in 2016, I was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, which is really bad. It comes on very suddenly, so it was a huge shock. But inflammatory breast cancer is not like a regular cancer at all. There's no tumor. They don't even really know what it is, but what it seemed like it was a cancerous virus. It spreads really, really fast, and it's very, very deadly. So when I was diagnosed with this was not good news at all. The biggest thing about inflammatory breast cancer is you need to get diagnosed very, very quickly. I live in a really small town with small town doctors, and I did not get diagnosed quickly. So by the time I actually got into care, I was stage like 3D, which is really bad. So the interesting thing about it is that it wasn't just about me. And this is the first thing that we need to understand in Die Before You Die. There is nothing about any of us that is just me, an individual, all by myself. We're all intricately connected in so many different ways. Cancer itself seems to be a disease, a modern disease, reflected by just literally the toxic nature of our environment, coupled with the toxic nature of our society, of course, which intertwine together. Toxic society creates toxic environment. Then the toxic environment makes people sick, and then you're around and around and around, and you get more toxic. And this toxicity is kind of like you could almost think of it like an entity itself, because it almost feeds on itself, just the way that cancer does, right? So first of all, getting any of these modern illnesses isn't just you getting it. We're all part of this massive human experience that's going on. And these things come both from outside of ourselves and from inside of ourselves. And there's really no separation between the outside of us and the inside of us. So this is the perfect analogy for Die Before You Die. Because what dies is not the real physical you. What dies is the ego, your sense of separation. And the Sufis call it the nafs. And actually, I mean, the saying itself is just completely false, misstated, because the ego isn't alive. It has no life of its own. Feels like it does. The naphs are not alive. Um, they're not like a virus or a cancer that gets you. It's just completely your imagination, your projection of things. So what dies in Die Before You Die is something that's not even alive at all. Things that are not alive really can't die, but that's semantics. It's a beautiful saying, and it's really more useful for us to gain wisdom in how to be a human being by looking directly at the statement, die before you die. So what actually dies is your projection of your being into things outside of you. And I like to think that the easiest way to see it as false and therefore drop it is to realize that it's not really something that you've created. The naphs, our sense of separation, is taught to us in our culture from a very, very, very young age. I'm also going to be tying this series into wisdom that comes to us from native traditions that are starting to like bloom forth and bring us the wisdom that they have retained. And it's going to be a very interesting balance to look at these two things, because here is our totally toxic society that feels like it's self-perpetuating. It kind of is self-perpetuating. And then over here is native societies that teach people from the day that they're born how they're intricately connected to everything. And how easy it is to fall into illusion, how easy it is to fall into thinking we're separate. And we'll also bring in some science, because one of the reasons this happens is because our brains are just so smart. We are able to take this and this and this and this and put it together and make them seem like they're related. We are so capable of creating visions and illusions of what we think the world is like, and then believing that this illusion is so. So native traditions are this long, long, long history of how to take a human being with this brilliant mind and keep us in balance. Because there is sides of ourselves that can go out of balance and back into balance. And there's always an inner core of mysticism that is naturally in balance. So we're going to be exploring all of these things with this Die Before You Die, and little threads of how it relates to my experience of being diagnosed with this terrible cancer. And just for your information, about 10 years before I was diagnosed, the survival rate of inflammatory breast cancer was 0%. By the time I was diagnosed, it had gotten up to like about 20%. And there is a inflammatory breast cancer research facility down in Houston, Texas, which is where I went, that had brought it up to about 40%. And I don't know what they are now, but it was a very, very dire diagnosis, sudden. And just to kind of jump to the end, I didn't die. Go tell. most important, it was nothing that I did that made me live. It was also probably nothing that I did that made me get it in the first place. So we have a big journey ahead of us to work through all of these things.